Great, thank you. All right, welcome everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is the 115th consecutive meeting that we've had. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator, as well as Dennis Small and Dennis Speed, my co-moderators. And I like to remind people why we created this forum 115 weeks ago, which was to unite the international peace movement. As everyone is well aware, there are many efforts to split people apart, divide us, and keep us from communicating. But if we actually want to achieve true peace in the world, we need to bring people together of many different philosophies, ideas, cultures, religions, in order to accomplish this goal. So I thank you all for joining us in that effort. And please take a moment to share this invitation with other people that you know, other organizers, organizations, your friends, your family, respectable enemies that can understand what we're doing here today. To start us off with this meeting, we have Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga, start us off for the meeting.
Let me say hello to all of you. Today is obviously an extremely, potentially very fateful day, because today you have the meeting between President Trump and President Putin and their delegations in Anchorage, Alaska. And, you know, a lot has been said. A lot of people have voiced either panic or hope or sarcasm, cynicism. I think we will know in a few hours from now what will be the outcome of this meeting. So let's not speculate, because our approach is not the reading of tea leaves, but rather an organizing approach, because you know, the reason why we were totally excited when we heard the news about the location of that meeting was because obviously the location of Alaska brings forward the potential of building the tunnel through the Bering Strait, connecting the Eurasian landmass with the Americas through an infrastructure corridor. And, you know, if you look at the composition of the delegation on the Russian side, you have very powerfully Lavrov, Shoigu, Ushakov, but also Kirill Dmitry, who is the present president of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Russia. And he has come out in the past repeatedly for the construction of the Bering Strait tunnel. Now, why is this so important? You know, obviously, this is a project which goes back to the middle of the 19th century, to the time of Lincoln. It has, you know, encouraged the vision of many people ever since. But in the recent several decades, this has been part of a program which was very much promoted by my late husband and myself, namely in the context of the World Land-Bridge, the idea that eventually, very soon, one could connect all continents through infrastructure corridors, either tunnels or bridges, so that soon, very soon, you can travel with maglev or other fast train systems from the southern tip of Argentina and Chile all the way up through Latin America, Central America, North America, Canada, Alaska, and then through the Bering Strait into Russia, and from there all of Eurasia, then through a tunnel through Gibraltar, or maybe from Sicily, a bridge to North Africa, all the way through Africa to the Cape of Good Hope, and likewise another connection through the Indian subcontinent and tunnels and bridges into Indonesia and some of the other countries in that region. So eventually, the idea that we would be united through a network of infrastructure connecting the economies and the civilizations around the globe into one interconnected I. And provided that we will not have World War III, that is the natural course of events. Sooner or later that will happen. But if it happens now, it could be a very important piece of war avoidance. Now, I'm hopefully optimistic that this may be on the agenda, simply because, it is such an obvious potential. President Putin has mentioned in the recent several years repeatedly, especially in the context of the Vladivostok East Economic Forum, the incredible economic potential which lies in the development of the untapped raw materials in the Far East and Siberia, much of which is under permanent frost conditions and therefore has not yet been developed. But if there would be such an infrastructure connection, then even these climatic difficulties could be overcome. There are modern ways of building cities even under permafrost conditions. So given the fact that, also President Trump is known to be a real estate expert, he has for sure a sense of it, and I'm absolutely certain that that potential has not escaped his idea, and it would be a perfect way to outflank all of his opponents, including those very strange Europeans who are presently calling themselves the coalition of the willing and who have tried everything to prevent Trump from ending the Ukraine war. The recent example being Chancellor Merz of Germany, who last Wednesday, just 2 days ago, had a meeting in his chancellor office where the only physical person participating was Zelensky, but he was by Zoom connected with the other European heads of state who are part of the coalition of the willing. And they said, we have absolute conditions. What must come out of this meeting in Alaska? There can be no land swap. There must be first a ceasefire. And, then basically repeating the conditions, including Ukraine's access to NATO, listing all the reasons why the war is taking place in the first place, because it did, encroach on the core interest of Russia's security interest. And therefore, it came to this very unfortunate development of the Ukraine war. Now, I'm pretty sure that, while ending the Ukraine war is a very important topic also for Trump, for Putin, I don't think it's the most important topic because, first of all, the military gains of Russia in Ukraine are spectacular, and all experts expect that that war will end anyway in a few weeks, simply because of a collapse of the Ukrainian forces. And just 2 days ago, Russia destroyed a factory which was in the process of building long-range missiles, the Sapsan missile, which was financed by a consortium of European nations, basically like the Taurus missile, but enabling Ukraine to build that on their own soil. So that has been destroyed, and with that, the option of equipping Ukraine with these long-range missiles. So I think much more important for Russia is the potential to normalize relations with the United States, because I think if you study the recent Russian formulations, articles, statements, it is very clear that what is counting for them is the immediate potential of that the present crisis over Ukraine could escalate into a global nuclear war. And, given the fact that you have a warmonger faction on the side of the Europeans in particular, I think they are looking at the potential of normalizing relations with the Trump administration as the primary desired outcome of, a process of discussion, hopefully going beyond Alaska, maybe have follow-up meetings also including the prolongation of the New START treaty, which otherwise would run out beginning of 26, maybe negotiating a new INF treaty. And these kinds of things are, in my view, much more the core security interest of Russia than even the battlefield situation in Ukraine, which I think Russia thinks they have pretty much under control. So I think that is the immediate situation there. As I said, we will know in a few hours. But let me just bring in one more dimension of why this infrastructure development is so important, because it's not just a way to increase trade. If the tunnel in the Bering Strait will be built, it is the estimate of a railway expert with the name of Scott Spencer that it will make possible the transport of 400 million tons of cargo every year, which is enormous. But more than just such a, one specific aspect, I think if you look at the role of infrastructure in the development of the human species in general, just think back, the last 10,000 years, where infrastructure developed from the coastlines, from the rivers. Eventually, with the development of the railway, it went more into the interior of the continents and more opening up all continents for human population. And Friedrich List, who is probably the best German economist, head of the customs union, who wrote very important books about the difference between the English system of economy and the American system of economy. He had a beautiful vision of what it would do if all of mankind would be united through infrastructure connections. And he coined a notion in an article he wrote in 1837 for the French Academy of Sciences, where he developed the notion of a space and time economy, where he said that the permanent completion of the transport and communication systems would be the precondition for the progress of humanity and enable them to fulfill all of their potentials and increase all areas of knowledge to inspire the sciences and arts, to basically cause people to make inventions in all kinds of disciplines. And the more quickly people could move from one place to the next, and the more close space would come together in this way, it would increase the efficiency and development of all human powers and increase the living standard of the population for the benefit of all. He says it much more beautiful than I'm paraphrasing it now, but he gave to this development of infrastructure this civilizational quality that it uplifts people, that it humanizes them and makes them more work together. Now, this is also important for the other crisis area which I want to address, and that is naturally the unspeakable situation around Gaza, where the genocide is fully going on. It is actually, it makes you speechless, because one asks what more does it take until humanity intervenes in this genocide, which is in front of the eyes of the whole world, because all the TV stations transmit, and there is now no more question that mass starvation, famine, malnutrition of thousands of children is going on every day. And it seems that the General Chief of Staff, Semir, is preparing the invasion of Gaza City. Ben-Gvir is escalating the annexation of the West Bank, where new settlements have been ordered, so that basically an option of a Palestinian state is made impossible simply by these mass settlements. So this is the situation where, we absolutely have to escalate our campaign. But, I think Francesca Albanese is absolutely to the point when she said that people should not be fooled by the sudden and very late recognition of many European and other leaders from Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, France, who all of a sudden call for the creation of a Palestinian state, that must not distract from the ongoing genocide, because, and that brings me to the point of the connection of infrastructure and solving the fate or solving the crisis for the Palestinian people, because we have said the whole time that the only way how you can solve it is not just a political solution, which would be a Palestinian state, but it must be combined with economic development, with the Oasis plan, which we have been promoting now for several decades, which was the idea of my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, and which has been now discussed by many people in the Middle East. And, there are many forces who agree that if there is any hope for a peaceful future, then it must be economic development, greening the desert in the entire region from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf states, and transform that region into economic prosperity, connecting it with the tradition of the ancient Silk Road, when that region of the world was already once the hub connecting Asia and Africa and Europe. And that is what it has to become again in the future. So I think this is a very traumatic moment in history, and I'm very, very happy that we have very knowledgeable speakers today to enrich our discussion. And we should really look at this whole situation not as something only to comment on, but we plan to bring in this idea of the World Land Bridge as a solution to these crises to more and more forum. On September 3rd, there is not only the historic anniversary of the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in the Pacific in Beijing with a big parade. We have made an appeal to President Xi Jinping to absolutely invite President Trump to participate. President Putin will already be a guest of honor at that meeting. And at the same day, in Vladivostok starts the East Economic Forum, where the issue of Arctic development will already be on the agenda. So that is a perfect opportunity to bring in the Bering Strait development, but also the idea of a new security and development architecture, which I think is the precondition to find a solution for the crisis in the Middle East. So let's discuss all of that, because this gives us plenty of opportunity to intervene, to try to shape the outcome of this historical moment.
Thank you very much, Helga, for that overview. It was very, very useful to situate the meeting today. I just want to give people a sense of, since we have a few new people hopping on the meeting, and as you're joining, we have an opening panel discussion and then a general discussion with the audience. Today we have an excellent lineup of people. We have Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, co-founder of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. We have Avram Berg, former Speaker of the Knesset and former head of the Jewish Agency and World Zionist Organization. We have Colonel Alan Corvez from France, a consultant, international strategic affairs, former advisor to the commandant of UN interim forces in Lebanon, and Professor Emeritus Richard Falk, Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor's chairman of the Board of Trustees and the former special rapporteur for human rights in the occupied territories of Palestine. So we have an excellent lineup of people today. So thank you all for joining us for this special meeting. So we'll continue with our agenda. We have Ray McGovern. Thank you so much for joining us. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Can I be heard?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for inviting me. This is a hopeful moment. only if, okay? Now, it was Augustine that said, hope, yeah, hope has two beautiful daughters. Anger at the way things are, and courage to do something about it and change the way things are. Now, that goes in spades for Gaza. We can all do something, and that's what we're all about here. We're about information, but we're also about action. So I want to just lead off with that, because this is a unique little group. We don't just talk, we act. And there are ways to act in concert with the various people involved here. Find those ways and act, okay? The other thing, of course, is Ukraine and the summit that's happening today. I, too, am hopeful about that. Now, what gives me hope about that? Well, let me just say again, we can have an effect on whether that hope is justified by doing what we can to become informed, and then to tell our neighbors, look, you can't get any hope, you can't get any information from what is called the mainstream media. Let's go to the summit. My goodness, I'm very hopeful. You know, I am a Kremlinologist, okay? That's even harder to say in Russian, okay? That means I look at what Russian leaders say, how they differ from one day to the next or 1 month to the next, and other things in the public domain. And as many of you know, I've been an outlier because I've been watching very closely. Suffice it to adduce the latest proof that comes yesterday from none other than President Putin. He told his chief security people that there is great reason for hope. Now, this is the day before he left, and he's in Anchorage now. This is what he said. At this stage, we are with the current US administration, and it has been making quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities in Ukraine. Whoa. So there's Putin saying sincere and energetic activities. With whom? Well, you can bet that it's with the Ukrainians that need to learn that there's no longer the largesse of support from the US, that the brain dead coalition of the brain dead, willing there in Europe, is not going to bring their chestnuts out of the fire. Putin went on to say, if we move to the next stages after this summit, well, then we'll begin to lay the groundwork for normal relations between the US and Russia. We can reach agreements in the field of strategic offensive arms control agreements. We can create the conditions for peace between our countries in Europe and in the rest of the world. End quote. Well, the New START treaty will expire in February. It looks like even President Trump is not brain dead on that. He has said, oh, we can't let that one expire. On the other hand, the president's spokesman, that is Dmitry Peskov, has said, yeah, that's nice words, but nobody's working on it. Let's get the United States people to be working on not letting that key treaty. It limited deployed strategic warheads to 1,550 on each side, and it expires in February, okay? So that's one thing we could work on. Now, I have to say that, well, let me just say that we'll have to see whether those of us who have been hopeful with respect to Anchorage will be borne out. As Helga has said, this will be just a couple hours from now. We'll have a pretty good idea. I think Helga is right in saying that the emphasis that the Russians are putting on this is a broader emphasis. Ushakov, Putin's right-hand person on these matters, has said, oh, of course, yeah, of course, we're going to talk about Ukraine. But in effect, we have bigger fish to fry. And I've just quoted Putin to the same effect. So what can go wrong? Well, there are a lot of people that are not on board in the United States. First and foremost, the media. The media profiteers on war because the media is a small part of the corporations that make the arms and sell them. The media is a big obstacle. There are other things like the brain dead people ruling Europe now. Merz, Macron, what's this, Stormer, the guy in Poland. I mean, these people just don't get it, and they're political hacks that bubbled up in their party machinery and all of a sudden ended up leading countries. Well, are they a factor here? Well, let me just say this. The Secretary Secretary General of NATO, the new guy, what's his name, Rutte, he called President Trump daddy, in an affectionate kind of dependent way, as we would use the word daddy. Well, I have some news for you, Rutte. This daddy is a deadbeat daddy. Okay? He's left his family. The children are having to fend for themselves, and he's not paying any child support. That's the daddy that you have been depending on. Forget about it in the future, unless you come on board here and try to be sensible and work not against peace in Europe, but for peace in Europe. What else? Well, the only other thing I'll say is that a big factor here is China. Now, I don't mean just in the sense of the tunnel that could be built on the Bering Strait. I mean, the Russians could do that in 2 years. Witness the bridge they built there on the Azov Sea. The Chinese could do it in probably 2 months. I exaggerate, of course, but there's all kinds of potential to get that thing done. All it needs is real estate people like Trump and Witkoff to say, hey, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we can put condominiums on each side. I kid about condominiums, but all kinds of prospects loom large in the future, as long as they're not sidelined by people like the neocons in our country and like the brain-dead coalition of the willing in Europe. So we'll see what happens later today. I remain hopeful, but I would remind you one more time that hope has 2 daughters. They're beautiful. They're equally important. The anger that results from seeing how things are, particularly in Gaza, forced starvation, genocide, and the courage. The other daughter is named Courage. Now, let's summon the courage to do what we can in our own little milieu and get off our rear ends and see what we can do together with others and make this better and contribute to the solving of these very acute problems. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ray, for for your contribution and the very wise words for the discussion today. And I'm sure many of us are getting off our rear ends as we speak to take these actions. So we'll continue with our discussion. Next, it's very wonderful to have you on, Mr. Avrenberg. He's the former Speaker of the Knesset and former head of the Jewish Agency of the World Zionist Organization. And I very much appreciate the work that you've been doing as of late to mobilize the Israeli people to stop the genocide against the people in Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much both for the very being of this forum and for having me into it. It's very humbling experience to be in the presence of so many people that I read about, follow, and sometimes even disagree. It's really a privilege. I asked myself, the minute I got the invitation, I asked myself, how do I want to approach this afternoon topic? And I prefer to give you a very narrow slice or laser beam slice of an action rather than go for the bigger picture. Because when we go to the bigger picture, I will be a little bit more reluctant than Ray to ridicule people who were voted by millions of people as no-brainer, people with no brain. I mean, the minute you ridicule the democratically elected representative, you actually ridicule the voters. And this is something that, at least from my experience in politics, you don't really want to do when you want to engage in a dialogue to change people's opinion. The same is that I have much less trust in the stability and the sustainability of Trump's philosophies. And I'm not at all sure that whatever will be offered or presented or agreed upon today in Alaska is not what we call in Hebrew written on ice. So I want to approach so many of these things, but let me limit myself to a narrow issue of Gaza. And about these 2 points of introduction, and then a little bit of an argument. The first is, I'm reluctant, and when I say reluctant, it is not that I do or do not. I'm really I'm doubtful about using terminologies. For example, for years, people are using what happened in the occupied territories by Israel is an apartheid regime. The apartheid regime was a very, very malicious South African Afrikaners imposed upon the majority of African of the Black community in South Africa. Is it wise to copy paste the terminology that was defined in order to describe a situation to a different situation, which is completely different? The same is taking the term genocide. The term genocide, as much as it was born as out of the womb of the Second World War, I mean, cynically so, or ironically so, among others who gave birth to it is the Jewish lawyer Raphael Lemkin and few others, and now Israel accused by it. The problem is that it is a legal term. And for a legal term, we have to go into lawyering up and listening to, is it according to the definition of the international law? Is it not according to the definition? Is it according to the original of the 40s, or is it after Kosovo, former Yugoslavia precedents, etc.? And I say, I don't want to lawyer up. I say, and if it is not a genocide, is it kosher? The answer is no, because what we talk here is about ethical and moral thing before we talk about legalities. In one of these days, in one of the demonstrations or protests or vigils against the war, chased me down the street a group of right-wing, I can say right-wing thugs shouting after me, Avram, we want to talk with you. I said, okay, I'll talk with you. And I said to myself, listen, if it's talking, it's okay. I'm good at talking. I was the Speaker of the House. So speaking is something I know how to do. And if they will lose it, I will run faster. Okay, this way I train for my next marathon. I'll run faster. So we stopped talking, and the first episode was about shoutings, and okay. Then a few minutes later, one of them said, listen, I know you're a lefty, you're no good Nick, you're a peacenik, but I want to ask you a question. Did we build gas chambers in Gaza? I said, I hope not. He said, so it's okay. Now, the idea that you compare everything to the absolute evil, and then if it is short of it, it's kosher, is a bad argument. The same with a genocide. Let's assume that the ICJ or ICC will come out and say, no, it's not a genocide. So is it kosher? The answer is no. It's horrible. So I want to talk about the ethics of the problems and then to approach the conscience of the ethical person rather than waiting for the verdict of the legal definition. Let's go to the day of October 7th. Whatever Israel did to the Palestinians in the 100 years of conflict, harassing, wrongdoing, expelling, Nakba, tragedy, occupation, settling, whatever we done to them, and we did a lot, does not justify the first step of atrocity, the first crime of atrocity performed by the Hamas warriors or terrorists or whatever we want to call them. At the same time, whatever Hamas did on October 7th and on does not justify anything, any crime that Israel is performing in Gaza ever since. Here we have two crime sets that do not annihilate, do not balance, do not cancel each other. And we have to address them both. Not to say because you do this, it justifies to do that. And not because you do that, it annihilates my original primary sin. No, it does not. We speak about two politics or two philosophies or two paradigms with criminal implementation. I take it a step further. From an Israeli point of view, I'm responsible as much as I'm against this war, and we pay prices for it, everything, and take positions as long as Israel is a democracy. Yes, it's a democracy in deficit, but it is a democracy. As long as it is a democracy, I'm responsible for my government, because whether I voted for it or not, right or wrong, it's my government. So I'm responsible for it. If I'm responsible for it, I cannot wait 4 years for the next time to replace the government because so many horrific things are happening. I have to do something now. Because democracy in politics is not just a ballot box every 4 years. It's a constant, permanent responsibility of the government top down and of the citizens bottom up. The problem with the majority of the Jewish Israeli citizenship is they approve a lot of what is being done on behalf of them by their own government. So what does a dissident who does not approve it and does not accept it? Violence is not a tool. Military coup is not something which is part of the syntax of the democratic process. What do you do? It's a question with no good answer. You refuse to serve, you write articles, you call calls, you organize people, you push back the police and the army wherever they are, and yet it is not enough. And we all ask ourselves the same question. By the way, it's not only here. I mean, wherever we have these kind of atrocities, wherever we have these kind of crimes against humanity, and the reality is malicious. Ethiopia's civil war is awful. Sudan is back on fire. And I suffer from it. Whatever the Indian government is doing in certain parts towards the Muslim minority troubles me. China, I'm not very happy with whatever is happening. Myanmar, I mean, all over the world I see it. And yes, this is my chunk, but it's a larger one, as Helga gave a description of the Tour de Horizon, that so many problems burning all over the world. What do we do about that? So one way is what you do, and this is to create the anti-hatred coalition. The same way there is the hatred coalition in the world because Trump and Erdogan and Putin and Netanyahu are cooperating. So why not having a for good coalition? The positive coalition, the do-good coalition. And this is part of this structure of coalition. But then when I look at the Israeli particular reality, I will say that the future of Israel and Palestine is in the hands of three people. It's in the hands of Chancellor Merz. It's in the hands of Mohammed bin Salman. It's in the hands of the individual Jew.
No.
Chancellor Merz is as follows. I'm going to be very brief about it. Up until October 7th, Israel drew whatever possible from the Holocaust account. Everything we did, we justified by saying we had a Holocaust. So it's self-defense, whatever self-defense is. It is you owe us, whatever the world owe us, etc. After Gaza, the Holocaust cannot be a credit for the Israelis for any politics. And the minute Germany will understand that Israel is not the Jews that they victimized in the middle of the 20th century, but Israel is something else, and therefore Germany should stop to give the automatic safety net to whatever wrongdoing Israel is doing. Germany will come back into the world coalition which opposes these kind of crimes. The second is Mohammed bin Salman. He's not my dream. I mean, I understand that the Saudi democracy is a flourishing one, it's getting better one, etc., etc. Not sure I want to be a citizen of Saudi Arabia as for now. Nobody offers me, by the way, but assuming, theoretically speaking, it would have been. Yet the way he offers a different kind of politics and policy for the region is an opportunity not just for Saudis, opportunity for many moderate forces, including Israelis and Palestinians. And if he will be determined enough, and Israeli society will understand what he's doing, there is a future there. God forbid that if Israel will not listen and will follow Netanyahu, and then will be neglected or abandoned or forgotten at the side of the road. And the last but not least is the individual Jew. I wrote an article last week. It was just an article, an op-ed page. And I said, listen, we cannot hide behind the collective, the government, whatever it is. We have responsibility. And there are so many Jews around the world, in Israel and around the world, who are worried that this is done on our behalf. Whether you're an Israeli citizen or not, Jewishness is larger than the Israeli citizenship. And I try now, out of this article and the tens of thousands of feedbacks and reactions I got, some of them are even very good, some of them are very threatening, to try to galvanize and to organize a world petition of Jews who say not on our behalf. And the minute the Israeli government will understand, or the Israeli public will understand, that there are millions or millions of individual Jews who do not accept the legitimacy of the government to do what they are doing on their behalf, as if on our behalf. It will be a decision of the government not just to demolish Gaza, that many may be in favor, but to demolish the very oneness of the Jewish people. So between the Jewish individual who must assume responsibility the same way I call them or call him or her to do, plus the offering of a new Middle East setting done by Mohammed bin Salman, and the removal of the automatic Holocaust protection of the Israeli wrongdoings, I believe this is a direction that might offer a relief from the tension, a resolution, and a better future both for Israelis and Palestinians.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Berg. This has actually been very useful to get these insights from you and the arguments that you're making. I'd like to go to Helga Zepp-LaRouche for a response. You muted, my friend. There we go. I see you're unmuted.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, very briefly, I thank you for your contribution, and I would really like to have the opportunity to discuss this topic with you more in depth, because in Germany, obviously, this Holocaust issue worked also to basically get the German response totally backing up, but no matter what the Israeli government did, independent of, and I think the Israeli government and the Israeli people are not the same thing. So, in a certain sense, this is it's very difficult to even discuss in Germany, because if you say the wrong things, you are being called an anti-Semite immediately, even if you have absolutely no intention about that. And the people say all the time Germany worked so much through its history, and that's very laudable. I think that is not quite true, because the view even of the Holocaust has become very reduced, and it has left out the incredible damage done by Germans in the Second World War, especially to the Soviets. They lost 27 million people. That has been erased from the memory. There is a demonization of Russia going on, which is absolutely horrifying and not justified in anything Russia has been doing. And by the same token, that is being extended, to China if they can get their way. Anyway, I just want to say it is extremely important to develop an open approach to discuss these questions, because if you cannot discuss it anymore, then it becomes a weapon. And unfortunately, I have to say that the issue of the Holocaust has been weaponized in Germany to such an extent that if you oppose the German government sending weapons to Israel for the use in Gaza, or just otherwise, that becomes impossible to even discuss, and that becomes a terrible injustice immediately thereafter. So I just would like to have the opportunity at some time in the future to really engage with you in an honest discussion about this.
Go ahead, Mr. Berg.
About the honesty, I do not know. I was too many years in politics, so I do not promise to deliver. But I'll be more than happy, and I'll give my 2 nickels into the opening of the next chapter of our conversation, whether privately or collectively. In 2007, I wrote a book about the omnipresence or the total presence of the Holocaust in our life, and how the Israeli politicians or Israeli politics made the Holocaust from a trauma to a strategy, to a national strategy, even utilitarian strategy. And one of my motivations in writing the book, that became a very infamous book in Israel and very interesting international bestseller, was that I wanted to establish a connection with the German intelligentsia, to open a conversation. And when I came for the roadshow for the book, so many of my friends, I mean, non-Jewish intelligentsia, said, Avram, maybe we agree with you, maybe we do not agree with you. We cannot engage in the conversation. It's impossible for us as Germans to do it. This was 2007. The question is nowadays, 18 years later, is it possible through think tanks, through policy papers, through thinking groups together, to sit on that and to explore what is possible and what is not possible? Because it's not just an exchange in a forum a couple of minutes before Shabbat. It is something much more profound. And one of the issues to address, both on the Israeli Jewish side and on the German side, on the other side, is as follows. Martin Schulz, the former president of the European Parliament and the head of the SPD, told me at the time that for him, maybe he didn't say it that way, but for him, Germany, I mean, New Germany exists in order to make sure that Israel exists. And I want to explore this equation. Can Germany continue to be the Germany it wants to be if the Jew is not a victim? And Israel is not a victim community, it's not a community of Jewish victims anymore. So much so that in many dimensions, not every dimension, but many dimensions of our beings, we are okay by being victimizers. What does that mean to the inner soul of German identity? That the state of Israel is this rather than the victim they need us to be. So it's not just a discussion about two national strategies, the Israeli Jewish one without the Holocaust or with reduced Holocaust, and the German one with less guilt feelings about the past. Responsibility, yes, guilt feelings, I'm not at all sure, but it's also about a deep, profound question or questions about national collective identities at the towards the second part of the 21st century.
Thank you very much for that response. I'm sure that, Helga, unless there's anything more, I think we should continue. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Berg, for your response and your contribution to the discussion. I'd like to bring in Colonel Alan Corvez from France. He's a consultant of international strategic affairs and former advisor to the commandant of UN Interim Force in Lebanon. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Corvez. Please go ahead.
Allez-y.
Oh, you're muted, my friend.
Ok, vous m'entendez? Voilà.
Do you hear me?
Yes,
Bonjour,
oui.
merci de votre invitation.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Je dois dire que
I have to say that I was very interested by the intervention of Mr. Berg, former president of the Knesset, and I really appreciate his lack of ideology, because the world today is dying. The world is dying.
Est-ce que c'est bon? Oui.
Yeah, yeah.
J'ai eu un message me demandant
No,
de changer de
it's
langue.
okay,
Non,
it's
ça
good.
va?
No, it's good.
Est-ce
Go
que vous
on, please.
m'entendez?
Yes,
Bon, je continue. Donc,
I go on, please.
voilà,
Thank you.
il est
So
dans le raisonnement
he's
rationnel.
thinking
Or,
rationally,
ce dont le monde souffre
and what the
actuellement,
world is dying
c'est
today
de n'être plus dans
is
le
that the world
raisonnement
is in
rationnel.
doesn't think
En France,
rationally.
il n'y a
In
plus de
France,
réflexion
there
stratégique.
is no
Nous n'avons
strategic
plus de
thinking.
doctrine stratégique.
We
Nous
have
sommes
no more
totalement
strategic
alignés
doctrine. We are
sur
totally
l'OTAN.
aligned
Du
on
fait
the
de la
NATO
perturbation
policy
actuelle de l'OTAN,
because of the
nous
perturbation
sommes,
inside NATO today.
nos dirigeants
Our
sont
leaders
complètement
are totally
à la dérive et se
lost,
jettent dans
and
l'idéologie.
they are totally
C'est-à-dire
ideological.
l'idéologie, c'est-à-dire le mal est
What I
mal
want to say by
là.
ideology
Donc,
is say that there is an evil there, and we have to
on n'a plus
kill
la
this
possibilité
evil, and we are not thinking strategically,
d'avoir
and we have no more the possibility to have a strategic discussion, rational discussion regarding the problem of the world, and have a strategic discussion, even if we have different opinion, different orientation. And that's why I was very happy to listen Mr. Berg, and he's very courageous. Regarding what is going on in Palestine, this question of the Holocaust that he was explaining, which is very important. It's not only because of Germany, the relation with Germany. I'm sorry, because the video of Corvez is very... So we have to say that the Israeli army is already today doing an Holocaust on the Palestinian, and this notion Holocaust, this notion of Holocaust, we have to really understand that, and why you have this opposition, the jihadist opposition, the terrorist opposition, the uprising of the people against this policy of Holocaust was doing by the Israeli government. And if the Palestinians take some risks to go and fight the occupation, there was a lot of uprising in the past, but this time it was very, very big and very. So it was very shocking for everybody. So because they decided to change their policy, to have a lot of alliance to support this operation from the Palestinian. And now we are in a situation where two blocs are opposing, but today we can see that the majority of the population of the world, not only the population in itself, but also the states, is against Israel and its policy and supports Palestinian revolt against the occupation. So my question is this one: how Mr. Trump, who is quite interesting, who was elected to bring peace in the world, in Ukraine, in Palestine, and elsewhere, why Trump is not doing anything, is not acting to stop Mr. Netanyahu? This is my question, because it was said by the former Knesset president. Of course, we have to differentiate the population and the government. It's true. And also all the Jewish we are living in the world, around the world. But why Trump? We want to make America great again, as he says. How he is not able, how he is not understanding, and is still supporting the Israeli government, which is attacked by almost all the population and all the states in the world. So it's not good for the United States of America, which is not good to support Israeli government today. So is there some dark forces putting pressure, blackmailing him to support the government of Israel? And we can see every day a lot of video of people dying, starvation, killings in Gaza, which is horrible. But Trump, it's my question, Donald Trump is controlled by dark forces, which in fact push him to not intervene in the situation, and is opposing to the global majority of the world. France, Canada, other countries are now saying that they will recognize the Palestinian state. It's the first step, but it's a turning point. It means that we have a global movement, that we cannot stand with the Israeli policy in Gaza. We have to change, and most of the countries of the world now are opposed to the policy of the Israeli government, and of course opposed to Trump finally, because Trump is supporting this policy. So that's the question I have today. And also the same in Ukraine. Is President Trump understand the security imperative proposed by Putin when Putin asked for a new architecture of security? In the time of Biden, he presented to the European Union, he presented to the world. He had a strategy for Russia, with the NATO, Europe, and the US. So it was never done. But Putin proposed this new architecture of security with Europe, NATO, and the US. So Trump is understanding that it's time to have this strategic partnership. And Russia said at the time that they will never threat anybody in Europe, never threat anybody in the US, and have a policy of non-intervention in the domestic affairs. So, but now the condition for peace in Ukraine, I'm not sure that I think Trump understood the necessity to have peace in Ukraine and to have a global security in Europe. And if Russia has no security, the world has no security. And I think that Trump has understood that. And after 3 years of wars and hundred thousands of deaths in the Ukrainian side and also in the Russian side, but now Putin will ask Trump to have a part of the 4 oblasts in the east of Ukraine, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Lugansk and Donetsk, to have that as a Russian part, as a part of the Russian Federation. And nobody will stand up there, because all these oblast population are totally for Russia and ask to join the Federation of Russia. So, and I start my intervention saying that ideology is destroying everything, and there is no rationality in the strategic discussion between the leaders of the world. There is no logic in the international discussion. We just say this one is bad, this one is good. We are the good, and the other are bad. We have to get out of this ideology of good and bad, nice and bad, and we have to recognize what the Israeli army is doing in the Palestine is horrible, but we have also to understand that the first minister Netanyahu and his government can continue to do this is because they have the support of the United States of America. And when Trump will say stop now, because it's not good for the United States interest, I'm sure stop this horrible policy, and I'm sure that Israel will stop. So we can have discussion. We can say that we will recognize the Palestinian state, but it's not real, because everything depends on the president's decision, the president of the United States of America, to stop Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Corvez, for that. I totally agree with you. I think that that's very true. We have to overcome our ideologies in order to really make this work. So thank you very much for that intervention in this discussion. And I'd like to bring in Professor Emeritus Richard Falk, who's the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitors Chairman of the Board of Trustees and former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied territories of Palestine. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Falk. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's been a very stimulating conversation. I wish I had come earlier, because there's too much to respond to at this point in the multi-faceted dialogue. But let me begin by saying that it's, in my judgment, an extreme mistake to think that Trump, as a leader, is motivated by rational considerations. He has everything he has done since he's taken over this presidency in this new term has been to destroy knowledge-based policy. He's attacked universities, the best universities. He's sanctioned a UN special rapporteur that was bravely trying to tell the truth about what was happening in Gaza and was a source of trusted and independent information. He has not objected to the killing of journalists or the censorship of journalists who are in a genuine democracy, are essential obstacles to special interest politics. In other words, you have to consider that Trump is motivated by a lot of narcissistic and irrational forces that are playing out in contradictory ways. I very much admired the courage of Avram Berg in saying what he did about the situation that Israel has provoked, but he neglected the key word, in my view, which is Zionism. And unless you face the fact that embedded in Zionist ideology is the dehumanization of the other, and from the very beginning of the establishment of Israel, from its sense of the superiority of Western civilization, what Edward Said called Orientalism, there has been this idea that a Jewish supremacy state is one that discriminates against non-Jews and exploits them in the process. So that whether you call it apartheid or some other system of racist domination, it is inherent in the Zionist project. And also, part of that Zionist project is the network of influence it has exerted all over the world, particularly in the United States and the liberal democracies of Europe. So unless there's a disentanglement of Israel from Zionism, I don't see how Ray McGovern's favorite daughter is going to flourish. It will leave us, it seems to me, with the angry daughter. And we must, I think, try to enchant the daughter that has courage. And I guess in our time, Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur on Palestine, occupied Palestine, comes closest to being that courageous daughter. And we should be very thankful for that. And the other aspect of the Gaza situation that I think is crucial, Ray alluded to it, I think, and Helga also in their remarks, that we must make a urgent transition from words of condemnation to actions of solidarity, actions that have the sense of emergency and urgency as their foundation. And we may be too late already. See, this military operation has caused massive malnutrition and disease that is spreading throughout the entire surviving Palestinian population. We do not have time to ponder alternative scenarios for the future. And I think we have to face that fact. Let me just say a word about genocide. Again, I'm to some extent disagreeing with Avram Berg, because in my view, genocide is what the eyes and ears of the world have been seeing for more than 22 months, unmistakable atrocities, and the notion of genocide is a moral notion and a matter of political reality as well as a legal notion. In fact, the legal definition is the legal verdict is something for a formalization of the moral and the political. And we don't have to wait for the International Court of Justice to convert the idea of a plausible genocide into a legally definitive conception of genocide. It is there for us to see. And one of the famous Orwellian observations was that the last move of the fascist totalitarian state is to make people believe that what their eyes and ears see is not the real truth. In other words, it is to make us subordinate what we see and feel and know to the lies of the established order. See, and so what has been happening is that through Zionist influence, through Israeli control of the public discourse, there's an attempt to so confuse the perception of reality that what seems to be the truth is really punished as lies. And in the liberal democracies, to call what's happening in a true way is something that is subject to punitive reactions. People have lost jobs, students have lost visas, there's been a discrimination against the truth. And until we liberate ourselves from that, there's no way that the courageous daughter is going to prevail. And I would say just a final few sentences about Ukraine. In a very real sense, the Ukraine war was converted by Biden, not Trump, into a geopolitical struggle between the US and Russia at the expense of the Ukrainian people, and at fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian, in a sense. And there were many chances for accommodation and reconciliation early after the provoked Russian attack that were repudiated by the Biden presidency. In fact, he persuaded Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of the UK, to go to Zelensky and say, we don't want a negotiated peace. And it was an attempt to extend the aftermath of the Cold War into a new era of unchallenged global dominance by the US. What is hopeful about Trump, again, irrationally motivated, but hopeful, in my view, is that he has always seen the advantages of a geopolitical realignment. And that's why Russia, China, and the US are the key actors in his worldview, and Europe is bypassed, and the whole idea of his fantasy of a Nobel Peace Prize is that he'll provide the architecture and the motivation for this geopolitical alignment. He's very anti-internationalist. He has no love for even the best parts of what the UN system does, and it would be an error of tragic proportion to think that he's interested in a cooperative interstate compact to solve the problems of the world together. He's still a climate denier, a climate change denier, which is part of this war on science and on truth-telling. So maybe I've said too much, but I'll stop there.
Well, I personally greatly appreciate your intervention, Professor Falk. Thank you so much for joining us today and providing us your wisdom. It was very much appreciated. So I want to make sure to grab Ray. I know you had your hand up. I wanted to make sure we got through people and then come back to you. Please go ahead, Ray.
Can I be heard?
Loud and clear.
Yeah. I will defer to Ephraim Borg to reply first to Professor Falk, but I did want to pick up one thing on Ukraine. As we've been told, as we've been brainwashed in the West, the Russian attack on Ukraine was unprovoked and illegal. Now, the Secretary General of the UN has admitted that it was provoked. It's just that nobody heard his speech before the EU Parliament. The question about whether it was illegal or not, now I've asked Richard this a couple times going back 2-3 years, and I don't know, Professor Falk, if you want to go on the record here, but last time when I asked you whether it was illegal, you said this was unsettled law. Do you have any refinement that you could share with the rest of these folks, Richard? I'd really appreciate it.
Well, it's complex. Of course, lawyers are paid to give contradictory interpretations, and there's no question that they violated an international border, Russia, but they were super provoked. I mean, provoked is too mild a word to say. I mean, the U.S. Generated the truth out, as you know better than I, the 2014 coup. They encouraged the flirtation with NATO. They did all the things that would unsettle even the most cautious Russian leader. And then they built up the military capabilities of Ukraine. I mean, so in that sense, if there was ever a case for preventive war, Russia could make it as powerfully as possible. And only a convinced legal positivist would take the border crossing as the only relevant issue in trying to determine whether this was legal or not. So the issue is in some sense not resolved. On the other hand, it's really become the subject of state propaganda because it's so manipulated, and one sees the manipulation if you compare the liberal democracies' response to Ukraine and their support for Israel's attacks on the Palestinian people.
Thank you very much.
Double standards and moral hypocrisy.
Thanks.
Thank you, Professor
They
Falk.
undermine international law. If international law has any chance of regulating behavior in the world, it has to apply to the strong as well as the weak.
Right. Well, I also would like to go to Helga for a response to anything that's been said so far.
I just would like to bring in one more consideration, and that is that in observing how the international community has proven to be incapable of reacting to what I call a genocide in front of our eyes, that means that we as humanity as a whole are in a deep, deep cultural and moral crisis.
Right.
And not just the genocide going on in Gaza, it's, you know, if I can go through all the different reactions, but the fact that we are not capable of doing something about it, you can say, you know, if you want to fight it, you have to fight the United States, and who can do that? But, you know, obviously the UN Security Council has been blocked. They were completely unable, even the provision that you can go to the UN General Assembly if there is an injustice which cannot be resolved by the UN Security Council, did not resolve the situation. So that creates a real problem, which I think needs to be addressed very urgently. The second thought I want to mention is there is a need to separate, you know, to somehow get a clarity on that we cannot allow, even in front of the greatest evil, to in any way let that evil impact our souls. I know that, for example, many Palestinians say, you know, you cannot have an oasis plan because first we need justice. Well, that is true in one sense, but there is a very important line in Friedrich Schiller's play, Wallenstein, and I say it in German, and then I try to translate it. It says, es ist der Fluch der bösen Tat, dass sie fortwährend Böses muss gebären. It is the curse of the evil deed that it permanently has to give birth to more evil. And I think that that is a very important consideration, because if we are not capable of breaking through the cycle of violence, of, you know, revenge and doing justice in the name of justice, you know, getting back at the other one, I think we have reached a point in the history of humanity where we have to be able to take the level of the sublime. Nicolaus of Cusa had this idea of the coincidence of opposites. that the human mind always has to be able and is able to conceptualize a solution which is on a higher plane than the lower plane on which the problem arose. And I think that challenges us, that we have to make a cultural leap, that we have to apply the principle of aesthetic education to solve this problem by bringing in relation to the best of the other. And I know this is very difficult when you're dealing with a concrete situation like in Gaza, but I would like to bring in these considerations because I think they are extremely important. And I'm not claiming that I have the final answer to them, but they seem to be extremely important to me.
Great, excellent. So I think what we should do now, because we're at 12:30, we got another hour. I think we should move to the general discussion period and open up to the audience, and we can keep filling out more and more as we go. There's definitely plenty of questions that are coming in. I'm getting lots of text messages. So let me make this general announcement for everyone. If you are on YouTube, Twitter, X, Rumble, whatever platforms you're on that isn't Zoom, if you'd like to participate during the discussion period, you must be registered and get the Zoom link. If you go to the schillerinstitute.com, you'll find right on the top of the web page, the registration page to register. Just sign up, you'll get the Zoom link, and we do this every week, so please feel free to use that same link every week. And with that, Dave, just let me know and we've cut the stream.